Well, that's perfect, actually. I did want to talk about, this book does deal with his relationship with his parents a lot and how he's kind of grown as he's like, entering the last parts of his teenage years. But before we get into the book, let's talk about you. You've written many works over the years. How young were you when you began to pursue writing as a serious career? And then how was it starting out? Did you face any opposition from the people around you?
Well, I didn't start off so young. I mean, I was always a good writer, and I remember in high school, our English teacher had us write a short story, and I wrote one, and I turned it in. And when she turned back all the papers, she said, "Benjamin, would you please come see me after class?" And I thought, "Oh God," because my story had a lot of cuss words in it, and I thought, "Oh boy, I'm in trouble." And and I thought she wanted to talk to me. She was a new teacher, and she wasn't going to dress me down, but she was going to let me know that that wasn't cool. At least that's what I thought. And then after school, I showed up, and she said, uh, "Benjamin," she handed me my paper. "Where did you learn how to write?" And I didn't know what to say because I didn't know I knew how to write. I just wrote. And years later, I remembered her. I don't think she inspired me to write. And I did say, "Well, what good is knowing how to write anyway?" And she smiled at me. And and then one time she said, "Remember the time I told you that you were a smart kid? You know what you said to me? You said to me, 'What good is being smart anyway?' Someday you'll discover that being smart and knowing how to write are very important things." And years later, when I became a writer at 30, at 30, that's not so, it's not so old. I mean, might feel old to you and to people in their 20s to start writing at that age, but I didn't feel like it was too late. I'd been a Catholic priest. I thought I always wanted to be a writer. And when I left the priesthood, I didn't have anything to do except for get a new identity. And so I went back to school, went to a creative writing program, and I was determined to become a writer. There was no plan B. I'm 30 years old. No plan B. I'm going to be a writer. That's it. There's no other options. And I think that helped me do it because wasn't going to do anything else. I didn't want to do anything else. And I worked really hard and I was good at it. And, a couple of years later, I wind up getting a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford University, which is a very big deal, by the way, because you get to go. It's not you apply for this fellowship and you get to write for 2 years with the writing faculty at Stanford, and it's not like a degree. You just get to write for 2 years. And I published my first 2 books while I was in that program. And I had a wonderful mentor named Denise Levertov. And she was a famous poet. And she's the one that got my first book of poems published, which won an American Book Award. And that got my career going. Now, I'm not going to say that it was easy after that, because it wasn't. I worked really hard, and I got a job as a professor at UTEP, and I was writing, and then all of a sudden it seemed like my career was in the toilet. I had published 2 novels, and yet my 3rd novel was rejected by every New York publishing house, and then my 4th novel was rejected. And then I said, well, I was still writing poetry and publishing it. And I thought, well, that's not such a bad thing. But something happened. I couldn't give up writing fiction. And I started writing a book that became my first young adult novel, entitled Sammy and Juliana in Hollywood. And after that, I really became a YA novelist because I loved writing for young people, and I loved the whole thing. It was wonderful. And then after that, I published a couple more. And then I published Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And that I loved writing that book because I said things that I had always wanted to say. And it seems like a simple novel in many ways, but it was a hard novel to write for me, except for writing the characters. Once I discovered Ari and who he was, and discovered Dante and who he was, then that part was easy. And I loved writing their character. You know, a lot of the conversations they have, I had to cut. I wrote them talking to each other tons of times, but even though they're not in the novel, I really got to know how they got along. I mean, you know, I love writing their dialogues. I think I had a great time doing that. And that taught me a lot about who they were and what kind of people they were, and what they said and didn't say, you know, what they could say and couldn't say. And, you know, I believe that people in high school fall in love. I also believe that it's very difficult for them to articulate that.
Yeah, I know writing dialogue that doesn't appear in a final product is a good practice to understand a character. And do you feel as if you've written part of yourself into these characters? I mean, how much does your personal identity influence your work? With, you know, these books that have such deep, important themes, how does it incorporate who you are?
Well, I have to say that I've been a wise ass all my life, and so both of them are wise asses in many ways, but I'm both of them. You know, I'm both Ari and Dante. And if you went back to ask the people I went to high school with, a lot of people would say that, oh yeah, Ben is definitely Ari. And a lot of people would say, oh God, no, Ben is all Dante. And it just depends on how you knew me. And I was very brooding, and yet a lot of people, and I was miserable in high school. I think that a lot of people are, but I was really miserable. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I just hated it, which is not to say that I didn't do stuff in high school. I did stuff. And there's a lot of people who were surprised to me. Oh, you were so happy. You were miserable in high school, really? And I was really good at hiding that. I felt like a fraud and all of that. And I think maybe a lot of people do. But they were both me and different sides of me. And you know, it's like everything I write is a kind of a part of me, you know, and I throw myself into it, but they're fictionalized versions of me, but they're better people than I'll ever be. They're smarter. They say smarter things than I'll ever say. They feel more. Maybe they don't feel more, but they feel deeply. I feel deeply. I think it's important to feel and let yourself feel. I couldn't be a writer if I couldn't dig deep into my own feelings. I think that's really important, because that's being vulnerable, and you have to be vulnerable to be a writer. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and you did really well with that. You wrote very real characters. I know when I first read this book, I was in 7th grade, and I related a lot to Ari, even though I believe he was a bit older than me at the time. He felt very real. That, you know, he had this internal monologue where he was very much in his own head, way too much than he should have been. But that's something a lot of kids are. So
I
now
think
that
that's absolutely true. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's, especially at that age, we live in our heads. And the problem is, of course, that we believe everything we think, and that's a terrible thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book now. I know I first read this book, as I said, once in 7th grade. It became very important to me. It was the first book I've ever read that had LGBTQ like subjects in it. It seems something like taboo. It's something you can only find online. So seeing it in a printed book was very important. Do you feel as if though that was something of achievement in a way that you like were able to get this topic in a printed book for children, not children, but for young adults to see?
No, I didn't. think about that. I really didn't. It was a book I needed to write, and for personal reasons. And I don't know, I did. I thought there was a lot of books about LGBTQ people. I mean, I didn't know that there wasn't that many. There was some. I know there was some, and I thought, well, I didn't think what I was writing was all that important. It was important to me. And you know why? Because I was, this is something that I didn't know. I thought, well, kids today, they come out, it's easy for them. It was impossible for us practically, but for you, it's easy, people accept you and all this stuff. But I was wrong. I was really wrong about that. And so I discovered that what I had written was important for young people to read and to help them. But that I didn't know that. I didn't know. And I realized that, of course, I don't care if society is more accepting, but I think the very moment that you realize that you're different, that you're gay or trans or a lesbian, and you know that you are set aside from, you're not going to be like the straight people in the world, and you're going to have a different sort of life. When you really first realize that and tell yourself that, I think that you feel like you're the loneliest person in the world, and you feel alone, and you feel sad, and you're brokenhearted, and you need someone. And I think that my book helped a lot of young people because it made them feel like they weren't alone, that and that you could love, and you could have a life, and you could learn to be yourself. And I know that you have to be stronger than, I think we have to be stronger than straight people, because we'll always be a minority, and so I realized from the letters that I got from young people, it was amazing. It was amazing. Their letters changed my life. If young people think that my book helped and changed their lives, their letters to me changed my life. And it made me more compassionate, and it made me feel closer to young people, because I'm not young, but I feel close to young people, and I feel like I understand them more, and I feel the pain of how we've disappointed young people. We disappoint you all the time. We don't give you great schools. We don't put money for education. There's a lot of things that we don't love you. And I realize that you need us to love you. And I want very much to understand and feel like I may not have sons and daughters, but all of the young people of the world belong to me, and I have a responsibility to them. And I learned that because you let me know that.
That's really sweet. So I guess to kind of start off with the second novel, this one opens immediately after the scene in the desert in the first one. I know you said you had some difficulty writing this book. Was there some other plan you had, or did you always knew you wanted to pick up right where you left off?
Well, that seemed a good place, I guess. It's silly. This is one of the difficulties of that, of doing that, was I knew they were going to have sex, right? They're ever beginning to have sex. I would say, oh, wow, how the hell am I going to write that? What am I going to do with that? I didn't want, of course, I'm not going to make it like this big kind of like rated X kind of thing. But I thought, well, how do I do that? And it's like, I have never written a sex scene in my life, not even in my adult books, and they're pretty hard, but I don't write sex scenes. And I thought, well, I have to do that. Certain things I had to do, and I knew I had to do that. And it really challenged me. And because I thought, okay, like, I'm sure that these two young men aren't going to just like refrain from having sex. And I don't think when you have a boyfriend or girlfriend and you love them, I think that happens. And I don't think adults like it, but, like, they're not asking our permission, and it's not as if, we discover our bodies and all of that, and desire happens at any age, and it happens to us all, and we can't just shut it down. And I had to deal with that kind of desire. And I thought that was important, because I think young men and young women feel that desire, and they act on it, I think. And I think, I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think a lot of people do. I think many adults love their morality and they love their religion more than they love their children. But I think that when we have a child, we make a commitment to them and to their growth and to their needs and to their wants, and try to understand that. And I think that, I'm serious about that. I have nephews and nieces, and I'm very close to them, and I'm close to them because we make a commitment to our relationship. And I think that that's what love is. It's a commitment. It's not just a feeling. We don't just have friends and say, I'm mad at you today, and I don't want to be around you, and so I'm not gonna be your friend anymore. Well, you have days that you don't want to be around with them that day, but if they're your friends, you've made a commitment. You've said you've said I love you in a way, and I think that's true. I always say, like, all of my friends, I fell in love with them. That's why they're my friends. And not in the same way that you fall in love with like a romantic thing, but you did. You saw this person and you really liked them, and that moment you think, oh, what a great person. That's the moment you fall in love with them, and you want to be their friends. And that becomes a commitment, because friendship requires something of you. When they need something, and you're there for them. It may not be convenient for you, but that doesn't matter. It's not on my convenience. Your friends will need you sometimes, and you have to go to them and be there for them. And that's important. I think friends are really important. And that's why there's so much friendship in the second book, because they're so important. Because one, you can't just have one friend, and you can't just have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and say, okay, I don't need anybody else. That's not true. We need a whole community. And especially if you're gay, you have to have straight allies that are your friends. Because you can't make it in this world without them, without people that love you and support you and say, the rest of the world might hate you, but I don't. I don't hate you. I love you. And I understand, I may not be gay, but I understand that your life is hard and people will make it hard for you, but I got your back. And that's really incredibly beautiful and necessary in our lives. And I wanted to put that in the book, that it's just not about their love, it's about their community, their family, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And once again, this is a tribute to like how much of a real person they were. I know at their conversations when they were about to have sex or afterwards, it's very interesting. I mean, a lot of adults might say, like, oh, that's too childish, or like, oh, that's not how real kids talk. That is exactly how real kids talk. And as you had said with the friends, these are all real conversations I've heard or I've had with my friends of just kind of being mean to each other, but in a loving way. And I feel like Ari's friends really do become his family. I know you added Cassandra in as well. What was like your initial plans with her, introducing her, and like the story with her brother?
Well, she wasn't a planned character, but I realized that they didn't like each other. They just couldn't stand each other, and then he winds up at her house because her brother dies of AIDS, and people don't want to talk about that. Just like my oldest brother died of AIDS, and nobody talked about it, what he died of. They didn't, and I thought, well, how do we talk about it? If the adults didn't talk about it, well, Cassandra talked about it, and they became friends because she thought he was an entitled straight boy that just thought, I don't know, my life is easy, and she discovered that it wasn't true, and so she became instantly, she really was sorry, and she loved him, and I think it's because of her brother too, and so she was a character I introduced without meaning to introduce, and she became very important in his life. And I think that a lot of gay men have important women friends, and Cassandra became his kind of like a soulmate. And he loved Susie and Gina, of course, and realized that he did, and wanted to say, I'm sorry I was such a shit. I wasn't a good friend to you, but you were always a good friend to me. And so he decides, to tell them, and he's so awkward about it. Well, how do I do this? He's not used to talking about anything, but he realizes that he has to say he's got to have some friends, and all those things are hard. I mean, how do you tell your friends and begin to tell your friends in high school? Because I didn't come out till much later, so I didn't do that. But how do you, in high school, and you're gay, and you have a good friend, and it's important to tell them. And you say, well, I'm gay. You never know what the response is going to be. But I will also say that if they're really your friends and they love you, don't ever underestimate their love for you. Because none of my friends, and I came out really late, and they were all adults, and not one of them, not one of them rejected me. And some of them were very conservative people, or on that angle, or I thought they were, and they weren't. They were real open, and they say things like, I know how hard this must have been for you, and you went there to that place, and you had courage, and we admire your courage, and I think our friends would, I think we have to trust them.
Mhm. I know that like friendship, of course, is the main theme of this novel. Like you said, it's not something you can just drop in conversation like, oh, hey, I'm gay. I know when I told my best friend, it was very like a thing of like, oh, like, should I tell him? Should I really not? And I told him, he was like, oh, me too. And I'm like, oh, that's much easier then. And I think it comes with the idea of inventing each other. Like
Yeah.
Ari had said in as one of his father's letters, is that we all invent an idea of each other. And Ari and his father both do that a lot. I know in the first book compared to the second book, they have a very different relationship. They are much closer in the second book. And was there any inspiration when it came to his father? He's a very important character. I know I liked him a lot, just how deep he was.
Yeah, Our parents are important. Like, most of us aren't like Dante, who says, I'm crazy about my parents. I don't think most high school students would say, I'm crazy about my parents. And they might be, but they wouldn't, they that's the time of age we're separating ourselves from our parents. We want to be our own person, not just their sons. And it's hard, I think. And I also think that a lot of parents aren't like their parents. Not all parents are as supportive. There's a lot of parents who are that supportive. They are, but there's a lot of parents who aren't. And there's a lot of parents who'd say, actually would look at their sons and say, I don't know you, go away. I don't accept this. So there's kinds of different responses. And then there's responses in between. There's a lot of parents who say, well, I love you. But they think to themselves, oh God, and so, I know a lot of parents who's, they were in relationships with men, and those men would go to their house all the time, and the parents knew that they were like lovers or boyfriends and lived together, but they didn't say anything, nothing. I mean, they just accepted him, and they wouldn't talk about it, and it was fine. And that's how they do it. It's a negotiation. So different people do different things, and sometimes, and they just, as long as we don't talk about it, we're fine. And other people have to talk about it, and that's even better. And sometimes that conversation is slow, but it comes. So it can be very different for everybody. But I think I wanted to write a book where young people could say that there is the possibility of being accepted and loved and supported by parents, because I want young people to know that that's possible, that you can get there, sometimes slowly, but that's important, because parents are important. Parents are always important, and I really feel for young people who come from toxic families, who just reject them, because I think that must be very painful. That must be like the end of the world. It must feel like the end of the world, because my parents always loved me. I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't have known what to do. And I had a great mother who was wonderful. She's a wonderful human being, a wonderful mother, but a wonderful human being. And I wouldn't know, what would I have done without, if a mother had rejected me? I don't know. I think that would be, it's a terrible thing. And I know that happens, but that's not the book I'm going to write. Someone else has to write that book. I think that but I write the books that I can write, but I'm so happy to have written these books, because they've changed my life.
Yeah. So I want to ask another question about a quote. I'd actually written my college essay in this quote of we'll never be Mexican enough, and we'll never be American enough. We'll never be straight enough, and that down the road we won't be gay enough either. It stuck to me. And did this line come from the characters, or did it maybe come from a younger version of yourself?
Oh, it comes from me, but it's true. To lots of, as a writer, a lot of Latinos, when I first started out, there were older generation of Chicanos writers, and they'd say, well, you write like a gringo, and that was an insult, you do. And so, you don't really write like a Chicano, like a Mexican American, you write like them. And so they didn't accept me. It kind of made me mad. And I wanted to say, something, I don't have to give you my credentials, about if I'm Mexican enough. I grew up picking onions when I was 14, and child labor laws be damned. I know what it's like to do that. Do you? I shouldn't have to give them my resume. And so, and then I was educated and all that. And I went to Stanford, and that's kind of a fancy school. And so and I wasn't for them, you know, Mexican enough. And and then gay enough, you know, what is, you know, some people think I'm too gay. It's true. And some people think like, you played straight for so long that you act like a straight guy. And I don't think I act like a straight guy. I act like Ben, you know, and I don't know what exactly that means. And, you know, I laugh about, you know, when I first, because I was an adult already, I came out. And so, you know, you kind of do the Craigslist thing, and it's really weird. And I didn't do it for very long, but I studied it. You know, they want you to be, okay, I'm looking for a daddy. Well, you know, I'm not really a daddy. I mean, I'm older, but I'm not their idea of what a daddy is. Or I'm not their idea of, well, I want someone masculine. And for them, I wasn't masculine enough. And then, I want someone that's femme. Well, I'm not femme enough. Well, what the hell am I? You know, like you ask yourself, all these categories that we have. And I'm just Ben, you know, we don't always fit into those categories. And I think from a perspective of because I was, you know, I'm very much an activist, and people don't like me to be an activist for gay people. Well, I'm gay, you know, this is about me, you know, this affects me. And they well, you calm down, you know, you don't have to be so involved. In other words, you don't have to be so gay, you know, and so that happens, and it's going to happen all the time. It's going to happen all the time. Someone's going to, you know, and so you want to say, well, the hell with it, you know, you are who you are. Know yourself. It's really important to know yourself. And Ari and Dante, Ari, by the end of the novel, knows who he is. And that's what our job is in life. To know ourselves, know who we are. And God, that can be really difficult. But when you know who you are, then it's such a beautiful thing.
I definitely feel like a lot of, you know, especially younger kids kind of need that we don't need to fit in a category of American, Mexican, straight, gay. We can just be. I know that like in school, I had some friends who were like, oh, I didn't know that you were, you know, like this or this or whatever. I'm like, do I have to act a certain way for you to know that? I mean, I just, you know, it's part of me.
Well, yeah, but what do they know about you? If you tell someone you're gay, what do they know about you? Nothing. They don't know anything about you. They really don't. It's like, you know that they're straight. What do you know about them? Nothing. And they think that, you know, like, a cousin once told me, well, you know, we're really proud of you and you're accomplished and everything, but we just don't agree with your lifestyle. And I asked him, what lifestyle would that be? You know what I do with my lifestyle? I read, I write, I teach, I travel, and speak, and I'm an artist. That's my lifestyle. What are you talking about? You know, what do they imagine it is?
I think it comes down to a question of the default versus the extra option, as some people would put it as. So to kind of shift the tone a little bit, I want to talk about racism is also a heavy theme in this book. I know there's this teacher named Miss Livingmore, and she had said a line of like, I'm grading on a curve because, you know, Mexicans are comfortable in an education setting. Was Miss Livingmore perhaps a version of a teacher you once had, or did this like just come out of every racist thing you've heard?
No, well, I do think that some of my teachers in high school were racist, and I think that there's and I've talked to people that are younger than me, and they go, oh yeah, there's always one. There's always several that are racist, and they say things, and that are teachers, and what are we supposed to do? And they have ideas about who we are, you know, and what do you have to respond to that? You know, it's like, for me, it's like, just because of my last name, I'll never be a real American like they are, because that's how they think. I wish they wouldn't, but I'm as real an American as anybody else. I was born in this country. My parents were born in this country. I'm an immigrant, but I'm not a recent immigrant. And I know this country. And I when I went to school, college, there wasn't a lot of Mexican Americans. I made myself feel at home. Sometimes people said things, but I had to fit in, and I did fit in, and but not always, because when people said racist things, I called them on it, and they didn't like that about me. They thought I was too sensitive. Well, excuse me, I'm not too sensitive. You're insensitive. And so that then I went from being the good Mexican to being the bad Mexican, but I was still a Mexican because I was an American like they were. And that was a long time ago. I think things have changed for the better, but maybe not. Excuse me, it's like history repeats itself. And there's so many people now that hate Mexicans. It's really difficult. Racism is real, and it doesn't always have to be mean. It can be very subtle, but it's there. And and it's like I feel like this.
I feel like those racist comments are like those backhanded things of she fully thought she was being supportive, but really she was just really demeaning the people of color in her classroom.
Exactly right. And a lot of people, I have a friend of mine, my first agent, and she said there was a lot of riots and God, there was some demonstrations and all this stuff. And on Life magazine, there was a guy on a bike, and on the cover, he was doing this. And my friend's mother said, and we've been so good to them. It's like, and my friend thought, like, Mom, you're out to lunch. We haven't been so good to them. I mean, she was a nice lady and she lived in the suburbs and kind of naive, and but she had no right to be that naive. This country's not been good to Black people. It's not, and we don't like to be reminded of that, and what do you do? Again, know who you are. Know who you are. And I am a Mexican American. I am a gay man, but I am a man. And I don't feel less than because I'm gay. I don't feel less than because I'm a Latino. And in my books, Latinos are normal. They're normal people. And these young gay men are normal. They're normal people. They're ordinary people. Because you know what? That is normal for them. And they're not monsters. They're just the kid next door.
I think I have one final question, or actually two questions, but one of them's really quick. So first off, towards the end of the book, Ari is remembering when he first met Dante and remarks that is as if it happened in another life and that he's a very different person now. How was your view of these characters towards the beginning of the, writing the first book and now at the end of the second book? How have you seen them grow and change? And how is it you wrote that exact change really realistically?
Well, I saw that Ari changed because he's the kind of guy that when he knows something's the truth, it's the truth. And he doesn't run from it. So he knew, now he knows he's gay. Everything follows from that. And he's never going to run away from that. And he's never going to away from Dante, because that's, he knows, is the truth. And he builds from that and grows from that. And for Dante, and the way he sees Dante, we only know Dante from his point of view. And in the first book, he saw Dante as being perfect. And so we saw him as being perfect because we only knew him through his eyes. But in the second book, Dante's not so perfect, but that he doesn't have to be, he says. He doesn't have to be perfect. He can be himself. And that's a growth because Dante's not just an idea. Dante's Dante. And he has his faults, and that's okay. He's a beautiful man. He's a beautiful young man. And he has all those virtues that he had before, but he also has some flaws. And that's important. That's important to know. Because they're both just people. And Dante isn't this God. He's just
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that's very important in like any story, or especially in real life, that there is no perfect relationship. There's no, you're my perfect person. Both people can be very imperfect, but still almost be perfect together. It's, not some ideal person you're going to make in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do that. And when we make someone, we invent them as being so perfect, and then they do something and we're so disappointed. But that's our fault, not theirs. We didn't allow them to be human. So we're so disappointed. Well, shame on us. It's like when we see someone do something, it's not a good thing. And we say, they showed their true colors. Now I know who they are. God, that's judgmental and unfair. We judge someone by their worst moment. Well, you want people to judge us by our worst moment. We have them, And it's so unfair when we say things like that. Oh, now I know them. I saw their true colors. That's really a lie. And that's a lie that we always tell. And it's horrible that we do that.
All right, so one final quick question. I know the desert is a recurring setting. It's a place Ari goes to think a lot and often to clear his mind. And sometimes, he'd bring Dante and his friends with him. It's a very special place to him. Growing up or even now, did you have a desert or somewhere you can just go to?
I did. I would go to the desert and I had my spot. And it was like great. I would go there by myself. And sometimes I would take a good friend and say, this is my spot. And they would smile. They'd say, oh, Benjamin, this is in the middle of the desert. And I said, yeah, but I love the desert. And I love this spot. And it was a holy spot for me because it gave me comfort. And place is important. Space is important. And I still have a place. I still have a place that I go to. And it's like going to church.
Yeah. I mean, for Ari, again, the desert was the place we go to clear his mind. So bringing Dante there and even his friends later was very much showing himself like, hey, this is my, as you said, my space. This is somewhere that's important to me. And in a way, it's kind of showing him, I'm inviting you in.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Well, I suppose if there isn't anything left, would you like to say anything important? I mean, any news or anything upcoming before I kind of close this out?
Well, I am writing a new book. And it's called, it's about advice to my young readers. I'm sure it will be banned like a lot of my other books because they won't like the advice that I give you, but that's okay. And it's like, it's also showing you, it's like my boyhood and where I learned the lessons that I learned and sharing them with you. And it's called, it's going to be called, the secret of attracting hummingbirds. And a lot of it is like, how do we stay, how do we become good people, and how does that has to be important, and how do we stay good people throughout our lives, and how do we hold on to a piece of our innocence and our goodness and our kindness and never let that go? How do we go about that, and what's really important after all, and what isn't important, and so I'm really liking writing it. I don't know when I'll finish, but I'm doing that, and then I'm writing writing a new book of poems, which is, I know a lot of young people don't read my poems, but I mean, I think that they would like them. I think they're accessible and young people would understand them, and they're taught in colleges, and they're people are afraid of poetry. It's like oh my God, a poem, and they run away from it like it's gonna bite you and change you, and it's something. But poetry is beautiful, and if I hadn't been a poet, I would have never been the writer that I am today. So that's what I'm working on.
Oh, I know I'm currently in my poetry unit for my English class, so maybe I can convince my teacher to put one of your poems in there. But I look forward to reading your book. I
Thank you.
have some of your other books on my shelf in front of me. So I hope to read some of those one day, including a new book. I guess if that's it, thank you everyone for coming to the Tri-Teen Fest conversation. And again, once again, thank you to Mr. Sáenz. You've been a wonderful talk to have, and you are, again, one of my favorite authors. So glad I got the chance to talk to you. So we invite everyone else to, check out the other programs you have going on this week.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure. And you're a really sweet guy, and that's a great compliment.
Thank you, sir.